Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. We are back on the dev server and we are having a look at a new vehicle which is coming in for Israel. Israel usually has a bit of an issue when it comes to its ground forces, basically with a bunch of, well, copy-paste vehicles which are very similar to what you see in other tech trees. You have the Magaks, obviously, the Centurions in the form of the shots, the Terrans, which are the Russian vehicles, and then also the major kind of unique thing is, of course, the Makavas. Well, welcome to a mixture, a Frankenstein vehicle, which actually is unique. This is the Zelda, or the Zelda 60mm HVMS. What this is a mixture of an M113 chassis and then also a 60mm turret. This gun and also setup has kind of been on a few separate vehicles in the game, but not in this actual like proper setup. So for example, you have the Orbal 74 HVG, which is probably the closest you have to this type of thing, where you have the turret with the 60mm auto HVG cannon. You also have the VCC-8060, which has the autoloader with the 60mm cannon, the 6070 cannon. Now, for Israel, you now get the 60mm HVMS, which has very similar characteristics to those types of guns. So this vehicle, you'll actually find at 7.7 on the right-hand side of the Israeli tree, between the Giraffe and also the Rochev and the Zaklam Tega. So kind of the SPG line. Doesn't really fit in this line, but I would like to remind you that Israel doesn't really have any light tanks at lower BRs, apart from these two in this area. So putting it here, my guess is just because it doesn't really fit anywhere else in the other lines. So what you're getting out of this is quite a fun little vehicle. It has access to the standard M113 setup, so it has the 212 horsepower engine, and then also the transmission, which means that you can go backwards and forwards at a good click. The vehicle has a 5-man crew, surprisingly. The driver in the front, you have two guys, basically 2 meters apart because they're not gay. And then you also have the commander and the gunner, who are in the turret without commander controls, surprising. So this vehicle has survivability through numbers, definitely not through armor. It's an M113. 38mm and then 44 on the side is all you're really going to get. So the fact is, this vehicle has some really interesting X-rays, and they've actually fully modeled the horizontal drive and the basket, meaning that if you get shot here, guess what? You're going to have to actually repair all of this, just like you would on an Abrams and also on a Leopard, which is a bit of a pain in the ass. It's a bit of a lower BR, so it might be a bit easier. So the mainstay of the show is the 60mm, the Auto HVMS cannon. This actually has a 2-plane stabilizer on it, and at 7.7, that's actually quite powerful because most vehicles do not have access to these types of things. So I think generally that's actually quite nice in terms of it. It also says it has 6 degrees of gun depression. I don't really know where it gets 6 degrees of gun depression from because the actual turret itself is tiny compared to the chassis. You can see how much overhang there is of the actual chassis compared to the turret. So with this gun, actually getting that 6 degrees of gun depression is going to be hard to do because you're going to run into the chassis each time on either side. So not exactly sure how that's going to work. As a secondary armament set, it also has kind of a funny setup. So you have the coaxial 7.62mm, and then you also have these two guns on the side. None of them are 50s, they're all 7.62, so they're not really that useful, but it just looks kind of funny. And one of the things I'd say about Israeli vehicles in-game is they do have a penchant for just 1,000,000 machine guns, and this one is no different. What it is missing is smoke grenades, which sucks, because this type of vehicle would benefit so much from them being able to shoot a bunch and then reposition and then shoot a bunch more, but unfortunately that's not the case. Even though this thing has a much smaller gun, it only has a 5-second reload. If you compare that to a lot of other guns that are around this BR, so for example, the shot with the 84mm or the 20-pounder, that has a 6.3-second reload. And then the Magak 3 has a 6.7. So I would actually expect this gun to be a bit quicker than the 5-second reload, but it ain't. It does have a good targeting speed though, which is quite good, meaning that you'll be able to get this gun on the target a little bit more often. Now, this vehicle has access to APF-SDS, and you're probably going, oh my god, APF-SDS at 7.0? This must be incredibly powerful. Well, we have stuff like the M41D in the game with a weak APF-SDS, we have stuff like the Type 69 in the game with a weak APF-SDS, and guess what? This one is also pretty weak. It has very good penetration, but look at that projectile mass, 0.87 kilos. It's a very, very small round, and this means that the post-penetration effect is tiny. And around 7.7, you're getting into those pretty heavy vehicles in terms of armor, stuff like the M113s, obviously, the T32s, the IS4s, and then even if you get up-tiered, the T58s with the ridiculous amount of auto-loading damage that they do, and also armor on the vehicle, and also size. So the actual post-penetration effect of this makes a huge difference because you won't be able to just one-tap vehicles, and therefore you're going to need a quick reload to be able to follow up damage, and this vehicle isn't as good at that compared to other ones. You also have a HE shell, not very useful, but at least it exists. This vehicle, being a light tank, does also have access to scouting, which is really nice, but doesn't really get any of the other stuff. Doesn't have a drone because it's a rank 5, not a rank 6, but generally will feel quite good as it kind of goes around the place. So for me, with this vehicle, is it nice to see? Of course it is. It's always nice for Israel to get something which is unique and enticing compared to everything else that's in their tech tree, which is basically the same as what you see in other tech trees. What you're looking for in the good old Israeli tech tree is actually more down to vehicle lineups than anything else. The other thing that these vehicles usually struggle with is the amount of rounds as well. I'd say this one actually has a pretty decent amount with 23. I'll definitely take that. And you can see with the stabilizer, it's actually incredibly stable the way that it works. So you will be able to actually get shots off and very quickly with it. But just kind of showing you the gun depression. So this is the gun depression on the side. That's probably where the -6 comes from. But if you try and actually do it from the front, that's pretty much all you're going to get. So it's just not a lot for this vehicle. So just be very careful when using it. You're not going to get tripped up by that gun depression. Now, post-pen damage is one of those things that will be a problem. Mobility will probably be a problem too. This is, as I said, just an M113 at the end of the day. It's good enough in terms of kind of mobility, but there are a lot of vehicles that are just kind of faster than it. So yeah, it isn't amphibious, by the way. They just added that so it can generally like set it up. You can see there the amount of damage that this does, like just through the center of that vehicle. That's the issue with this. That round is going through the driver, hitting the engine, and not hitting the guys in the center. And that is what I'm talking about in terms of just post-penetration damage. So you're going to have to really, with this type of vehicle, you're going to have to really pick where you hit other targets and make sure to maximize as much damage as possible. And since you have the stabilizer, you'll be able to do that effectively, which will actually be really nice because it means that you'll be able to get the first shot off against most of the enemies that you face. So that, at least, is a big positive for this type of vehicle. I actually like this. You know, I like silly little vehicles like this in War Thunder. I think they're much more fun than random other Magak or random other Centurion. So I'm very glad that they added this thing, and I hope people enjoy it. It's one of the only ways to actually get access to this gun at a reasonable level. And I'm sure in the future, when they add some of these Shermans with access to this gun, or maybe I think a Chaffee has access to this gun, then maybe it'll be at an even better level. But right now, this is what we have. A little chunky box with a pea shooter. As always, I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time.
I'd just like to thank GMG Smiley, CD Beans, Chieftain Mike, EMN3 Galaxy, Tulio Pontecorvo, Brendan Quinn, Carrion Crow, Gus Irenicus, Pyman, Wartinder, Teddy, Daniel Stanton, Martinez, B. Young, Ozzy Panzer, Alan Hacker, Liam Shear, Opium Prime, Lafouche, Sem, Aslan, Uncle Bean, and Derek R. for supporting the channel.